Just over a year ago, the Raptors made the big mistake of trading for Thaddeus Young, and it's a mistake that the Raptors are going to feel the repercussions of for years to come. Let's get into it. The era of Thaddeus Young in Toronto seems to be at its end, but let me explain to you why we're still going to be feeling the effects of this mistake for the next few years. If you guys don't know, this is Amateur Hour Sports, the YouTube channel dedicated to Toronto Raptors news coverage, reaction, and more. And I do that in videos, live streams, and shorts. So if you like what you see from today's video, make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more content just like this. Help me on my road to 14,000 subscribers. We're getting so close to that big milestone. But Thaddeus Young, it really feels as though his time is up in Toronto and he will not be here for the start of next season. The Raptors have to make some real wholesale changes to the team that was extremely underwhelming in losing in the first round of the play-in tournament to the Chicago Bulls. But part of where there's been issues this season certainly lies with the front office's decisions, especially as it comes to Thaddeus Young. Thaddeus Young has been here now for about a season and a half after the Raptors traded for him in February of 2022 at the trade deadline. It was a trade that cost the Raptors a first-round pick for the 2022 season, and given the lack of depth of this team, the issues in the depth of this Raptors roster, that is a pick that could have been really well used for this team. The Raptors have made a number of mistakes over the last few seasons, and Thaddeus Young certainly is one of them. This is a player who was guaranteed $8 million for next season, but quickly fell out of rotation due to his poor play, his inability to stay in front of his player on defense, and just a lack of overall production on the offensive end. Sure, the Raptors brought him into the team for the veteran presence and the leadership that he brought to the team, and I definitely won't say that did not have an effect on the Raptors winning 48 games last season and entering the playoffs as the 5th seed, but at what cost was it really? Was a first-round pick really worth doing this? The mistake didn't just stop with that trade. The mistake also transitioned into the offseason where Thaddeus Young was given a 2-year contract worth $16 million. Obviously, as I said, the $8 million was guaranteed for next season, and fortunately, next season the players only guaranteed $1 million, but this season, the effects of this season are going to continue to be felt by the team. So let's go all the way back to the trade when it happened in February of 2022. Immediately after the trade happened, I was unhappy with it. A first-round pick was paid to bring in an old veteran player past his prime. Sure, he brought a little bit of value to the team on the court and maybe a little bit more value off the court, but the reality was this was a player well past his prime on a rental contract who we're paying a first-round pick for. Now, of course, we also added in Goran Dragic in order to make that trade because essentially, we had to pay a first-round pick for Thaddeus Young and for the San Antonio Spurs to buy out Goran Dragic. But once again, I'm going to cite if that was really worth it for this team. The Raptors are a team best known for their development of players. Maybe that has stopped in the last few years, and that is why there are many more depth issues with the team. But also part of the problem is the Raptors are really not finding as many of these young and developmental sort of players. We've long been associated as a team who find these diamond in the rough sort of players, maybe undrafted players, maybe free agents who are overlooked by other teams, but we also have a very keen eye for the draft. Where we don't have a keen eye is the free agent market. And when the Raptors struggle to find roster pieces, actual development, actual rotational pieces in the free agent market, which they've done like in my entire time being a fan of this organization, when they struggle to find players in those free agent markets, they make up for it by their ability to find talent in the draft. And that is what Masai Ujiri is best known for, and probably his best attribute as a front office executive for an NBA team. But when you don't have that pick, you can't find that talent in the draft. I know we only moved back 13 or so places when we got Christian Koloko with the 33rd overall pick, but that's a significant difference. And I'm not saying I'm unhappy with Christian Koloko as the 33rd pick. I think that's a great pick at 33, but just imagine what you could be getting with that 20th overall pick. And just to show you what a difference even picks could make, we can go back to the 2020 draft where the Raptors selected Malaki Flynn with the 29th overall pick. Well, if you move up spots, all of a sudden you can get Tyrese Maxey instead of the Philadelphia 76ers. That's just a difference. I know that's one specific example, but that's just the difference. Moving up 10 to 15 places in the draft can do for your organization, especially an organization like the Raptors who so desperately struggles to find that free agent talent. As if that wasn't enough, Now the Raptors faced a decision where, well, we trade a first-round pick for Thaddeus Young. Don't want that to be a rental. We got to pay him up. And he played pretty well for the end of the season, so we really got to pay him up. And Thaddeus Young got that $8 million contract. Now, I will concede, when I talk about things, when I talk about mistakes, I try to look at it from a non-hindsight perspective. So the trade for Thaddeus Young, when it happened in February, I did not like for all the reasons that I'm outlining here. As the season went on, I came around to the fact, okay, Thaddeus Young helped out this team. Was it worth the first-round pick? Maybe not, but he helped out this team. And in the offseason, I felt as though it would have been the best decision to bring him back on that $8 million contract. It seemed like a decent value. Maybe a little bit much, but it seemed like a decent value for what we thought we would be getting from the player. So the mistake for Thaddeus Young, today I can criticize that trade. I can't really criticize the free agent signing very much because that's probably something I would have done in that scenario as well, especially given the lack of overall talent the Raptors were getting interest from in that free agent market. So Thaddeus Young comes back to the team on that $8 million contract, quickly falls out of rotation, and all of a sudden, in the biggest game of the season, the play-in tournament game against the Chicago Bulls, the player who the Raptors 1 year ago traded a first-round pick for was all of a sudden a DNP. Did not play in that game. The Raptors, maybe one of the biggest issues with that game was the overall lack of production they got from the bench minutes. Yeah, the starters were loaded up on minutes. Welcome to the NBA postseason, where your starters are going to get some extra minutes. It would have been a lot easier to rest the starters even further if you had more legitimate talent coming off the bench. Legitimate talent could be with that first-round pick that we gave away to the Spurs. That pick became Malaki Branham. There's no guarantee who the Raptors would have selected if they had that pick instead of the San Antonio Spurs. What I know is that the depth is the biggest issue with this team right now. The Raptors from the trade deadline onwards were getting outstanding production from their starting five. Maybe some of that production wavered in the fourth quarters of the games, as we've spoken about in previous videos, and as we maybe saw in that game against the Chicago Bulls. That could be more attributed to the coaching, but where the Raptors have had a lot of the struggles in that run from the trade deadline onward were the bench minutes and the lack of productivity from the bench. And people like to pin that on Nick Nurse. I have my issues with Nick Nurse. I do. I don't know if he should be back next season. I'm leaning towards him being fired this offseason, but I can't knock Nick Nurse for the amount of play time the starters got when I saw the caliber of the players and the production value we were getting out of the players who came off in the bench unit and were part of our depth. It just was not NBA level. It was not good enough, and it was not good enough for what the starters of this team needed. Again, we can go back to the free agent market where the Raptors, can you remember the last time the Raptors signed a free agent and he actually was a contributor for this team? Not somebody you brought back, they were a free agent and you just brought them back to your team. They were on your team that season before, they were a free agent, you signed him and brought him back. I'm not talking about that. A player who chose to leave their team and sign for the Raptors. Can you remember the last time that player had actually any sort of impact on the team? You may have to go all the way back to Corey Joe, and even then, we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel if Corey Joe is the pinnacle of actually finding a free agent for the Toronto Raptors roster. Corey Joe is a good player, he's a great backup guard, but if that's the player that I have to go to from that long ago, 7 years ago now, whatever it is, that showcases there's a little bit of a problem with your recruitment. So why have the Raptors consistently banked on that offseason recruitment to build this team when it's clear it is the weakest part of their front office? Why would they divert away from the likely best part of what they do as a front office, which is the draft? And it's something they've also done for next season. The 2024 pick is going to the San Antonio Spurs. And once again, we're at an offseason right now where we don't know what direction this team is headed in. We are a middling team, a mediocre team, encapsulated perfectly by a mediocre record right in the middle of 41 and 41. 41 wins, 41 losses. You can't get any more mediocre than that, and that is the worst place to be in the NBA because you can't get any good draft picks, and you also aren't challenging for anything meaningful in the playoffs. But for next season, we can't focus on that draft pick because we don't have a draft pick. So all we can do is try to make this team better and find more success for next season. but it's really difficult to find those players in the free agent market, and it becomes even more increasingly difficult when you've kind of set your team back by consistently trading away these first-round picks. Now, this season, it's great. We have the 13th best lottery odds. We're likely to end up with the 13th pick in the draft. That pick could have been a lot better for sure, but there was an opportunity here for the Raptors to find some talent and supplement the depth that is so desperately in need of more talent on it. And in a video from last week, I was complaining about the fact that there's no flexibility in trading these future picks because the 2024 pick could convey in 25 or 26. So you can't trade your 25 or 26 pick. And since it might convey in 26, the 27 pick might be a back-to-back pick. And under the Stepien rules, you can't trade the 2027 pick. So from 2025 till 2027, those picks are untradeable, locked into the team. And that seems like a bit of a negative because it is a negative for your flexibility. But kind of looking at it from a weird perspective, the way I am in this video, well, maybe it's a good thing that we're forced into keeping these picks and actually drafting players and drafting young talent, because it seems like that is what this team needs the most. And we're being forced into keeping those picks and maybe actually using them to improve this roster and improve it for the long term, not for half a season where you still lose in the first round of the playoffs, not for a season where you finish as the 9th seed and lose in the play-in tournament. Draft picks are the most essential piece in building the Raptors. Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, huge pieces to this team right now, were found in the draft. And Siakam in particular was a key supplemental piece to that championship while he was still on a rookie contract. So he was cheap enough that you could pay the likes of Kawhi, Lowry, Gasol, Ibaka, but he still had the production because the Raptors scouting team does so well in finding these players in the draft. But you can't find these players to supplement your roster and help your team if you don't have draft picks. And there was a mistake by the Raptors to bank on a player well into his 30s in Thaddeus Young. And in hindsight, it was a mistake bringing him back to the team. Let's rectify it this offseason, waive the player, open up that $8 million. It's going to be really difficult to find more talent for this team, but get the ball rolling. Use your draft pick. Get the ball rolling. Find something in the offseason, something meaningful on an MLE that can come and actually help this team for next season, because the bench desperately needs it. What do you guys make of it? Do you think the trade was a mistake at the time and still think it is? Do you think the opposite? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, because that is it for me for today. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button to support the channel. Subscribe to the channel if it's your first time here and you want more Raptors content and videos, live streams, and shorts. And I will see you again next time for another video.